Hey guys, I know this is the first upload in a while, and I know it's not really pertaining to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or anything, so some of y'all might be a bit disappointed, but I do promise it does relate to something I am very, very passionate about. Paladins.
光と影は一つとなり、そして真の力が生まれる。ライド、マジェスティロードブラスター。
Hey everybody, so if you haven't figured it out yet, today we're going to be talking about Royal Paladins for the game Cardfight Vanguard. I know most of my channel has been Yu-Gi-Oh! Related, that's how most of you guys met me, but right now Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not in a place I really want to be playing it, but Vanguard is, especially after that new ban list that just hit for the premium format, so just stick with me here on this video. I want to get it up there. I'm real passionate about the game, real passionate about this deck. So when it comes to Vanguard, you start with your starter, so we're going to be starting with Vanguard Brave. Vanguard Brave is your starter of choice. He has the Forerunner skill, which just means that when you ride upon him, you call him out of your soul. His other skill, which is the reason we run him, if the attack that he boosted hits when he boosts a unit with Blaster in the name, put him back in the soul, he searches for a unit with Blaster from your deck. That is any unit with Blaster in your deck. We run a couple of them. This is a Blaster focused deck, so you definitely want to see Blasters, and your setup does focus on having exactly 3 different Blasters, so this card will help you fix that. We run a lot of cards that fix that. This is the best starter to help fix that. Next, for our main boss unit, our target grade 3 ride that we want to hit every game, and the only grade 3 we run in the deck, is Majesty Lord Blaster. His main skill, of course, while on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, if Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark are in the soul, he gets +1 crit. That's on Vanguard or Rearguard, and if he's your Vanguard, he does get +5k and +1 drive at all times. That is on your turn and on your opponent's turn. So on your turn, makes it easier to hit your opponent. On your opponent's turn, makes it harder for them to hit you. And of course, his other Vanguard skill, when he attacks, you can put 2 Rearguards into your soul and get 2 imaginary gift force. Now he's already, going to be generating a lot of imaginary gift force just because on ride he gets you 1, and then you get 2 more when you swing in. And if you don't have either of your Blasters in soul, he sucks them up, and that sets you up for the whole game. Then definitely run him, and you run him at 4. So next on our grade 2 lineup is, of course, the main character, Ace Monster, the Dark Magician of Vanguard, Blaster Blade. His skill, when on Vanguard Circle, if you have 4 or more Rearguards, he does get +1 crit, so on your grade 2 turn, you can get in an extra damage if you need to. His other skill, when placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose a unit in the front row and kill it. Blaster Blade's kind of antiquated. The most important part of him is that he is named Blaster Blade. Same with Dark Magician, Red Eyes, Black Dragon, Blue Eyes, White Dragon, all of them. Those cards are important because they have that name. This name's Blaster Blade, so that's why he's important. Same is true of his evil counterpart in the Shadow Paladin clan, Blaster Dark. He's, Blaster Blade with a palette swap. What more do you want? His skill on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, when placed, Counterblast 1, your opponent chooses one of his or her Rearguards, retires it. He is not nearly as good as Blaster Blade. Blaster Blade's already kind of rough. This card's kind of worse when it comes to being a Rearguard. His Vanguard Circle skill, however, if your opponent has no Rearguards, you can discard a card, he gets +1 drive. So discard a card and you get to +2 off of what would normally be a +1. And you get extra trigger effects, so if your opponent doesn't guard it, you can get 2 crits on that drive check, stack them both on him, that's 3 damage, your opponent's halfway to dead. Definitely my preferred grade 2 turn ride. And that last skill there, this card is always a Royal Paladin, is more for V-Series than Premium, which is what this deck is for. A lot of people talk about putting the ride deck into Premium, and if they do that, you immediately drop this card down to 1 and put this in your ride deck as your grade 2 ride target. Every time. Without question. They're not going to put the ride deck in Premium. Stop asking for it. They're not going to do it. I think it'd be cool, but they're not going to do it. But if they do it, put him in your ride deck. Next, because the other 2 cards are so important, we will also run 4 copies of Absolute Blade Knight Libero. This card is basically pick a Blaster, call it. Or any other grade 2, because that's what his skill is. On Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, if placed from hand, Counterblast 1, search for grade 2, call it to an open Rearguard Circle. Special summoning from deck is always going to be good. And he also has an alternate cost of Soul Blast 1 if you can't pay Counterblast because you don't have any face-up damage. That works if you have no damage, 5 face-down damage. Even at the beginning of the game, you're going to have at least 1 soul you can afford to sacrifice. Even if you haven't resolved Vanguard Brave, your grade 1 is not important. And even if you do have to pay Counterblast, getting a body is just good. Fantastic card, run him at 4. Next is another old card, Favored Pupil of Light and Dark Lu. Lu is your multi-attack enabler. Without Lu, you do not multi-attack. There's another card that's also important to multi-attacking, but Lu, his skill on Rearguard Circle, when it is boosted by either Blaster Friend Barkall or Royal Paladin Flogall, both cards we will get into later, until the end of the battle, he gets 3,000 power, and he also gets the skill after the attack is over to counterblast 1, put him into soul, search your deck for any grade 2 with Blaster in its card name, call it to Rearguard, shuffle your deck, he gets 3k power. Usually you're going to be calling Blaster Blade because he's better on Rearguard Circle, but if you're strapped and you just need another attack, go grab Blaster Dark, he'll get the job done just as good. He can build soul and he can multi-attack. What's not to love about him? Run the guy at 4. So that is that for our grade 2 rear guards. Now we're going to get into our grade 1 rear guards, and the first one that we're going to talk about is Blaster Friend Barkall. This is one of those cards that helps Lu get his skill off. When your card name Blaster Blade is placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle in the same column as this unit, if you have a Vanguard with Blaster in its card name, countercharge 1. You boost Lu with this, attack with Lu, counterblast 1, throw him in soul, call Blaster Blade to that same circle. Since they're in the same column, you get the countercharge. So you basically Lu for free. Really, you use him because Lu's in the deck. A lot of people kind of cut him down to 2, but he's also got Blaster in his name, so he's searchable. And that may be justifiable to run him at 2, but I like him at 4 because I really want to see this card. And then our next grade 1 is Wingall Brave. Hey, I know what you're thinking. Wasn't this guy a grade 0? You are correct. He was a grade 0, but when V-Series came out and they gave him a retrain, they gave him a grade 1 and effectively the same skill. So Wingall Brave skill on attack or on the attack that it boosted while on the Vanguard or the Rearguard Circle. If the attack hit, look at top 7 for any unit with Blaster, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck. He stays on the board, which Wingall Brave didn't do. He can be the thing that hit, which Wingall Brave didn't do. It doesn't matter what he boosts, which Wingall Brave grade 0 didn't do. And in exchange, you only look at top 7. Most of the time, you're going to hit something with Blaster in its name. You're running, at this point, I believe it's 4 different cards with Blaster in the name. You're gonna hit one of them, most likely. You run him at 3 since the Wingall Brave as your starter, it counts as the 4th. The next grade 1, and kind of the final tech slot of the deck, is 2 copies of Cloud Lancer Grimoris. His skill, when placed, put 1 grade 2 from your drop zone on either the top or bottom of your deck, and then if you put a card, he gets power plus 10k. So he's not only is he a good booster, he recycles Blaster Blades. And recycling Blaster Blades is very important because you need to call them from deck with Lu so you can attack with them again. For our last grade 1, we do run 1 grade 1 PG. I am going to be using the Aegis Mare Dragon from D-Series because sometimes his PG is free. You need a grade 1 PG in your deck so that your G-Guardian Marin can call a PG from your deck and PG your opponent with a G-Guard. Alright, so getting in for the triggers on the deck. First trigger we're going to be running here is our heal triggers. We're running 4 of our G-Guardian Innocent Ray Dragon. The heal Guardians are just too damn good. They all have the same skills. Auto when placed on Guardian Circle. If you did not ride a grade 3 this turn, you can choose one of your Vanguards, give it 10k until end of turn, or choose one of your opponents, use it and give it -2 critical. Normally that's going to prevent a unit from doing damage. Even if you do check a critical trigger, that's still going to be 0 critical. You basically tell your opponent's Vanguard you're not doing damage, or you tell your Vanguard to get really big and really buff. That makes it easier to guard attacks. The other skill that it has is that if it's placed on a Rearguard Circle, if your damage zone has no cards, you put the top card of your deck into your damage zone face up. Since Counterblast is a pretty important resource, especially in Royal Paladins, if your opponent's damage and denying you, you've no longer been damage denied. Now you can do combos. Heal Guardians, they're just good. The only issue is that sometimes you can't G-assist, but you've seen how much searching this deck does. You're not gonna have to G-assist. And then for our next trigger, we're running 4 copies of Royal Paladin Flogall. She's one of the units you need to boost Lu with to get his skill off. She is an old crit, so she only gives 5k power. Still gives that 1 damage, doesn't have as much shield, but her skill makes her a mandatory 4 of. At the end of the battle that your Blaster Blade attacked your opponent's Vanguard, Counterblast 1, put her back in the deck, shuffle it, and restand that Blaster Blade. That's pretty good. Floral Paladin Flogall plus Lu equals 3 attacks, and that's just great, especially if you put it on a Rearguard Circle with like 1 or 2 force markers. That's just good. That's just really good. You need to run that. The next trigger that we're running is, of course, our Critical Stride Fodder. It's one of the old Revival Collection criticals. It acts as a grade 3 in your hand when you use it to pay stride cost, and that's fantastic. It's more mandatory in this deck because we were only running 8 grade 3s MLB in our Heal Guardians, so having this here as a stride fodder is fantastic. Yeah, definitely run 4 of this so that you can, you know, play the game. And then we have 3 draw PGs. We only have 3 of them because we've got a normal PG in the main deck already for a G-Guard. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Draw PGs are fantastic. Run them every opportunity you've got. That does leave us room for our next card, and then is going to be our Overtrigger. We are running the actual Keter Sanctuary Overtrigger, a Martinoa. His additional effect lets your rear guards perform drive checks, especially later in game when checking this thing really matters. That's pretty good, because you're probably going to end up swinging with Crystal Luster Dragon powered up by MLB, and that will, you know, let your 5 or 6 rearguard attacks get a drive check on each of them, and that's just fantastic. Now, because we're running this Overtrigger, that does mean we are not running Ultima. Some people might think that that is a mistake, and Ultima is a fantastic card. Do not get me wrong. If you want to cut the Overtrigger, put another crit in there, or some other, you know, Royal Paladin trigger spice that I'm not aware of, you go right ahead, bud. That's your prerogative, but Ultima is $60, so keep that in mind too. Hey guys, Future McShane here. I forgot to mention a card in the deck list initially. There is a card, an order card, that you do need to run at 3 of. That card is called When Light and Darkness Intersects. You know how we've been doing all this searching and stuff up until this point? Well, guess what? It searches you even more. This particular order has 3 different things that it can do. If you control Blaster Blade on Vanguard or Rearguard, go get Blaster Dark. If you control Blaster Dark on Vanguard or Rearguard, you go get Blaster Blade. And if you have Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark on somewhere on the board, go get Majesty Lord Blaster. So as long as you can find one of those pieces and you have this in your hand, you'll probably end up getting the rest of them. Definitely good. You run it at 3 of because you can only play 1 a turn, and multiples are bad. So yeah, back to the rest of it. All right, so that is it for the main deck. Now we're going to get into our extra deck, our stride deck. The first one, and probably the best Royal Paladin G unit. I call him the bad game design G unit. His name is Holy Dragon Crystal Luster Dragon. Once per turn, you can turn a face-up card in your G zone, and until end of turn, it gets the original abilities of all your Heart Guard units. So he gets the 5k, the crit, and the +1 drive from MLB. He does that for all Royal Paladin grade 3s. This means that they probably never have to design another Royal Paladin G unit ever. I don't think he's as impactful in MLB as in some other Royal builds, so, you know, you only need to run 3 of them, but he's definitely going to be your first stride if you went second, so you can set up, or later on, sometimes you just need to MLB your opponent, and Crystal Luster enables that while still being an even bigger number. He also has a GB3 ability where if you have 3 or more grade 2 units on the board, counting himself, so if your front 2 units are grade 2s, like a Blaster Blade and a Blaster Dark, whatever your fancy is, your opponent has to call 3 or more units at the same time when they called a Guardian Circle from their hand, basically forcing 4 cards out of your opponent's hand to try to PG it. If they G-Guardian it, it's a little different. If they don't have that, and they don't have the ability to drop that on all of the attacks you're going to be making, God, Crystal Luster can kill your opponent. For our next stride is the other Clan Collection stride, that is Divine Knight of Twin Absolute, Saint of Twin Sword. When he attacks while boosted, you can counterblast 1, choose a card in your G zone, flip it face up, and then you search your deck for 2 grade 2s, call them to rearguard, shuffle your deck. He can fix your board, so say you've been stuck on 2 Blaster Darks, or like a Leverone, a Blaster Dark, swing both of them at your opponent, then call out like a Lu and a Blaster Blade, and just go ham on them. And then if you check the Overtrigger on this guy after setting up your multi-attack swings, and you may be able to do the multi-attack swings twice, that's just so good. This card ends games too. Oh, also the units that he calls they get plus 5k for every face-up unit in your G zone, so he's a little bit late. He gets better as the game goes on. Another tech stride, we do run 2 copies of Divine Knight King Alfred Holy Saver. You need 2 of them because he specifically requires you flip a copy of him up. His skill is once per turn GB2, counterblast 1, flip his name face up. If your heart card has Blaster Alfred in it, and your heart card will have Blaster in it since it's MLB, choose a unit with Blaster Blade in its name. It gets, I think, plus 3k and Twin Drive. So if you are out of resources, you have 1 open counterblast, you stride this guy and tell your Blaster Blade to perform Twin Drive. You know, you could cut this and just run more Saints of Twin Sword or something, but I like the option to go into when you're low on resources. All you have is an open counterblast. Alfred's a fantastic pick. Then into our one-ofs, we do run one Holy Knight, Gancelot Peace Saver. Your first stride will either be Crystal Luster or Saint of Twin Sword, and you flip this up with it. It gives all of your blaster blades resist while face up in the G zone, and that's really the only thing you're running him for. He does have a pretty decent skill on his own. Maybe he could be your first stride if you're really struggling. But, you know, when this unit attacks, if you have a heart card with Blaster or Alfred in the name, countercharge 1 until end of battle. It gets +1 drive, and if you have another face-up unit in the G zone, gets +1 crit. He's basically can mini MLB and give you a counter charge. Then we do run our Progenitor Dragon of Total Purity Argnos. You know, ultimate stride, you have to discard a copy of MLB while you're on MLB to get into it, but then you don't have to pay stride cost for the rest of the game. Unfortunately, his on-play skill, if you do activate it, you have to call 5 cards from your hand, or however many cards are in your hand. Then you get to draw 3. So, you know, going into him when you have like a card in hand, not a bad play, because it's +3. But otherwise, you run him so that you can get free stride. Now, we do have one last finisher stride. We do run one copy of Divine Knight of Condensed Light, Albius Avalon. His skill is Generation Break 8, Counterblast 1. When it attacks a Vanguard, pay cost. Search your deck for up to 5 units. Call each one to a separate rearguard circle. They all get +4k, and this unit gets +1 crit till end of turn. You know, even if you only call like a Blaster Blade and a Flogall for your other 2 units, that's pretty damn good. Getting to GB8 is not hard at all. Usually the game's going to be over by then anyway, so you rarely go into him, but he's a nice option to have. Alright, so now we're going to go on to our G-Guardians. The Little Great Sage Marin, he's the one I've been talking about all this time. He's the guy that can call a PG from your deck, because his skill says you can, when placed on Guardian Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Alfred or Blaster in your name, which you always will at grade 3. Soul Blast 1. Search your deck for a grade 1 or greater card, call it to Guardian Circle, and it gets 5k shield until end of turn, and then you shuffle your deck. He's superior, calls a PG. That's really why you run him. In a pinch, if you've already drawn your PG, you can call one of your V-Series grade 1s, either Wingull Brave or Gamoris, and have a 30k shield. That's not bad. That may even mean you bump him up to 2. I just like him at 1, because really that's the only time I go into him. Otherwise, there's just more consistent ways to get the shield, since we don't run a whole lot of grade 1s, and you'd be calling grade 2s, and filtering out is always good, so maybe that's why you bump him up to 2. I just run him at 1. It's personal preference, I believe. The other Alfred Blaster G-Guard we use is a Great Flash Assault. When placed on Guardian Circle, you can counterblast 1, and if you're on a Blaster or an Alfred, she gets 5k shield for every one of your rear guards until end of that battle. You do tend to have at least 2 or 3 on the board. If you've got 4 or 5 though, then you call her, counterblast 1, she's a 40k shield, and that'll stop a lot of things. I mean, that's almost like guarding with an over trigger. You know, she's pretty good. Only cost a counterblast. I think it's a good one-of option to run. Next, we do run 2 Holy Divine Beast Mask Gall. Since we are on the GB8, running this one to get higher GB count faster, it's kind of necessary, so I run 2 of it on Generation Break 1, flip a G unit. If you have a rear guard in your front row, which you always will, especially since Blaster Blade has resist, it gets 10k shield. So this is your most common 25k shield G guard that you can run, and it makes GB for your GB8 to go off. We do also run 1 Vivid Sacred Staff Andrigus. He is a less costly but more requirement 25k shield. His requirement is 2 or more grade 2 rear guards for that skill to go off. If it doesn't, he is just a 15k shield, and you might as well. This is usually what I'd go into if it's like I really don't need a G-Guardian skill to go off. I just need 2 G-Guard 4 GB, and you'd go into this guy. Otherwise, he's a Mask Gall target. And then last but not least, we do run 1 Dismal. Even though Blaster Blade does have resist, people like to attack him because he's a threat. Making him unable to be hit for an entire turn is really good. Dismal skill, for those that don't know, she's a Cray Elemental, so she can be put in any deck, and when it is placed on Guardian Circle, choose a rear guard until end of turn. It can't be hit, and it cannot be chosen by effects of your opponent's card. So she's definitely a one-of, and in any rear guard focus deck, you need to run her. So that is going to be it for the Majesty Lord Blaster Premium deck profile. I hope you guys dig it, give it a try. It's so simple and straightforward and high power, and it's a little toolboxy. The only thing it doesn't have is a Denial Griffin to retire on your opponent's turn, but otherwise it's just such a fun deck, and it's in my particular aesthetic. I really like the design of Blaster Blade. He's probably like the best designed anime knight ever. I I do kind of fall off with Majesty Lord Blaster a little bit. I think he looks a little bit goofy. Blaster Dark, he just kind of rubs me the wrong way just a little bit because I feel like they, named him a little goofy and his sword looks a little bit goofier. Otherwise, he's just a palette swap of Blaster Blade. But the more I play with the deck, the more it grows on me. I just, wish something fit a little bit better into my aesthetics, maybe incorporated some dragon stuff. It's hard to find a dragon paladin that is meta enough to keep up with folks and be willing to take it to locals. But otherwise, yeah, just bring Majesty Lord Blaster and defeat people with 18k base, triple drive, Vanguard. If we can find that dragon paladin deck, then we'd really be good. I do have other decks that scratch that dragon itch. We'll go into those next time around, but that is it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around, and I will see you in the next one. Adios.